Saladin was no mere blade wielded upon the scorched sands, but a visionary architect of an integrated martial machine spanning from Sinai's dunes to the Red Sea. Within the fortified Crusader encampments along the Levantine coast, the mere whisper of his name transmuted aggressive stratagems into desperate retreats, casting knights into terrified endless vigils. The triumph at Hattin represented far more than a recorded military conquest, serving as the definitive proof that a singular, masterly mind could indeed redraw the world. He possessed wisdom his contemporaries lacked, realizing that the holy city of Jerusalem would never remain liberated while Crusader armadas roamed the boundless seas without any restraint. Amidst an Egyptian state inherited on the precipice of total fragmentation, Saladin gazed toward Alexandria and Damietta, vowing that the ocean must become the primary protective bastion. While his banners fluttered defiantly above Cairo's citadel, his strategic intellect soared across the cresting waves, meticulously charting naval confrontations yet unrecorded within the annals of warfare. The true terror he ignited was not solely born from the clashing steel at Hattin, but from his silent resolve to besiege the Crusaders by sea. Within the grand halls of European monarchs where missives brought tidings of catastrophic defeats, advisors questioned with palpable dread how one mortal could dominate such diverse fronts. The architecture of his Ayyubid legions differed from all predecessors, possessing a rigid hierarchy, absolute devotion, and learned scholars who calculated stratagems alongside commanders before every engagement. Haunted by the memories of the disintegrated Fatimid navy, that once mighty maritime power eroded by internal rot, he swore a solemn oath never to let it sink. Majid al-Din ibn Luqman, the paramount architect of the Ayyubid fleet, carried the piercing gaze of a commander who understood that the ocean yields no secrets. Umar al-Yamani, the poet whose verses transformed into clandestine intelligence reports, used his lyrical mastery to draft the blueprint of the naval force Saladin envisioned in dreams. Within the ancient labyrinths of Alexandria, where the pulse of navigation had throbbed since the pharaohs, a new sovereign began reforging this city into a lethal spearhead. The misty harbor of Damietta bore witness to secrets woven in silence, where master carpenters raised massive timber skeletons and mariners endured rigorous training upon the waves. He was not merely constructing a fleet, but forging a revolutionary naval doctrine, declaring that whoever commands the waves commands the Levant and thus secures Holy Jerusalem. This marked the genuine inception of the front historians long neglected, a battlefield where no shifting sands lay beneath the feet, but only the crashing of tides. The Mediterranean served during those centuries as the vital life artery for the Crusader kingdom, the singular path delivering men, iron, gold, and European dreams of Eastern conquest. Within the bustling ports of Venice, Marseille, and Genoa, colossal vessels were laden monthly with soldiers, armaments, and provisions, steering inevitably toward Acre, Tyre, and Tripoli's shores. Deprived of this essential maritime lifeline, the Crusader principalities would have inevitably withered and perished like severed branches from their parent tree within a few short years. Saladin recognized early what many Muslim leaders ignored, that a war of attrition on land alone would never eradicate a presence sustained by the Atlantic and Europe. The formidable Crusader fortress of Acre stood perched upon the ocean's edge like a knight relying on his back, facing the southern desert while anchored by waves. Within the command centers of Tiberias and Ascalon, Crusader strategists believed with absolute certainty that the sea was an unshakable ally, a liquid fortress that none dared. Yet Raynald of Châtillon, the infamous marauder known to the Arabs as Arnott, ventured beyond defensive logic into madness, unleashing his martial insanity toward the sacred Red Sea. From the impregnable heights of Kerak and Shobak, Raynald managed the industry of plunder with a bandit's intellect, devising unprecedented methods to strike Islam's heart in the strategy was pure lunacy. Transporting a dismantled fleet across the Jordanian desert on camelback to Aqaba's shores, then launching them to assault the Hijaz's holy cities. In the year 1182, this insane vision manifested as wooden fragments carried through the sands were reassembled upon Aqaba's coast, becoming warships that roamed the pristine Red Sea. This constituted the supreme provocation in the history of the Crusades, threatening the holy sanctuaries from the water and severing the pilgrimage routes from Egypt and Sudan. Within Mecca, terror rippled through the gathered pilgrims as news arrived that vessels bearing the Crimson Cross were lurking in the Red Sea to enslave and swallow trade. The ultimate crime was not merely the coastal raids Raynald unleashed upon small towns, but the profound symbolic horror he ignited throughout the Muslim world from east. In Damascus, Saladin received the dire tidings with eyes gleaming like cold fire, a fury that did not blind but instead sharpened his resolve and aimed his. He swore an oath of lethal gravity that Raynald would never survive if captured, and that a fleet would be built to transform the Red Sea into graves. Such was the crucible where the Ayyubid navy was forged, born not from the joy of adventure but from the absolute necessity of protection and deep strategic. Saladin ibn Luqman's mission resembled that of a smith ordered to reforging a shattered blade in the heat of battle, for the Fatimid fleet was ghosts. Within Cairo's grand arsenal, whose foundations traced back to the Fatimids, Ibn Luqman recruited master carpenters from Egypt and the Levant to revive a nearly forgotten Maritime. Securing materials was no simple task, as the resilient timber required for warships was harvested in Lebanon's forests, making every piece of wood a logistical mountain battle. Saladin personally corresponded with his regional governors regarding the fleet, providing meticulous instructions that revealed the complex mind of a leader managing a multidimensional and grueling war. While his fleet took shape in Cairo, he dispatched spies to the Crusader ports of Acre and Tyre, gathering critical intelligence on European naval formations and tactics. The inaugural strike in the Red Sea was swift, as Saladin launched a flotilla toward the Gulf of Aqaba to eradicate the remnants of Raynald's piratical fleet. Husam al-Din Lulu, the right hand of the Ayyubid navy during its infancy, proved that naval brilliance was not exclusive to coastal dwellers but was forged through. In the early maritime engagements off the Egyptian coast, Ayyubid vessels demonstrated a remarkable capacity to adapt, mirroring European direct collision tactics while countering them with superior. The tactic of grappling and boarding, inherited from the ancient Battle of the Masts, was revitalized as Ayyubid sailors tethered ships together, transforming waves into a battlefield. Yet Saladin introduced a dimension previously unseen, utilizing the fleet as an instrument of strategic reconnaissance, airborne eyes upon the waves providing data that land scouts could. In the year 1179, Ayyubid vessels sailing from Egypt intercepted vital Crusader supply convoys between Levantine ports, signaling that the Mediterranean was no longer an unchallenged Frankish. The Ayyubid naval bases in Damietta, Alexandria, and Farama operated with a rare synchronization, each performing a specific role within a sophisticated, integrated defensive and offensive maritime. The gradual maritime blockade of Crusader supply lines was not a singular event, but a methodical policy executed over years with the patience of a master strategist. In the summer of 1179 AD, a remarkable scene was witnessed off the coast of the Levant. Ayyubid ships chasing a giant Crusader crow laden with weapons towards Acre, in a naval drama that proved that the Ayyubid fleet had become a real adversary. The Crusaders responded by reinforcing their harbor defenses, installing massive iron chains across port entrances and mounting heavy catapults upon towers, dreading a potential Ayyubid naval invasion. This pervasive fear constituted a strategic victory for Saladin. He who forces his adversary to expend vital resources on defensive measures has already won half the war. Within the Red Sea, the Ayyubid fleet, constructed in response to Raynald's madness, fulfilled a dual purpose, securing pilgrimage routes and safeguarding lucrative trade from Yemen, and the swift Ayyubid cruisers developed in the Egyptian shipyards were significantly faster than the lumbering Crusader transport vessels, a superior speed that compensated for their lighter tactical. The Ayyubid navy possessed no margin for error with limited resources, prompting Ibn Luqman to train his captains in the rare art of tactical, intelligent naval withdrawal. Within the councils of Saladin's high command, naval deliberations occupied increasing importance, proving the leader was redefining the boundaries of war to include horizons others feared to. The struggle for the ocean mirrored the conflict on land. He who controls the joints controls the body, and the Crusader presence relied upon coastal ports, not. Saladin's strategic equation was precise: apply pressure on inland fortresses while choking maritime supply lines, making the human and material cost of the Crusades unbearable for Europe. During those intense years of construction and maneuver, history quietly recorded pages that would later be forgotten. Small, fierce naval skirmishes ignited off the shores of Tyre. The ocean imparted lessons the desert could never provide, a patience as vast as the deep water, and a strike as sudden as a rogue wave crashing. Even when Jerusalem fell in 1187, Saladin never forgot that the vanquished knights fleeing the city would not remain in exile, but would inevitably return from the. He knew his victory at Hattin would trigger a tidal wave from the west, a third crusade led by the man whose name made all Europe tremble. The Ayyubid fleet, meticulously built over long years, was destined to face its ultimate test at the walls of Acre, where naval warfare rules were rewritten in. The Siege of Acre between 1189 and 1191 served as the tragic theater where the Ayyubid navy, built with years of sweat, collided with the European iron. From the heart of Europe flowed the armadas of the Third Crusade, as England, France, and the wealthy republics of Venice and Genoa deployed their massive naval power. The Ayyubid fleet stationed before Acre attempted the impossible, forcing a maritime corridor to deliver supplies to the besieged garrison while facing a vastly superior European naval. True terror was not found in numerical inferiority, but in the horrific sight of the Anglo-French armada obscuring the horizon with an infinite forest of white sails. Colossal Crusader vessels were laden with massive stones launched by naval catapults, and with every volley the atmosphere was torn by a sound like mountains crumbling into. The Ayyubid fleet refused to flee, maneuvering with desperate valor, yet the disparity was overwhelming. Through weeks of relentless combat, they lost over half their strength too. During the darkest hour of the siege, Ayyubid commanders attempted a brilliant deception. A single ship disguised as a Frankish vessel, manned by sailors speaking European tongues. This disguised vessel successfully penetrated the Crusader blockade on its maiden voyage, delivering its cargo into Acre and sparking a wave of jubilation throughout Saladin's hopeful military. Yet during its second attempt, the Crusaders discovered the ruse, and faced with certain capture, the Ayyubid captain heroically scuttled his own ship to deny the enemy. That voluntary sinking remained one of the most tragic images in Islamic naval history, a harsh doctrine declaring that what cannot be liberated must never become an enemy's. Ultimately, Acre fell not due to terrestrial weakness, but because the Crusader naval blockade strangled all hope of reinforcement, transforming the sea into a vast, inescapable prison. The surrender was as bitter as the preceding efforts were heroic. As the captive Ayyubid garrison marched away, Saladin watched from afar, already drafting new strategic designs. Richard's cold-blooded execution of 2,700 Muslim captives after Acre's fall was a moral explosion, shattering European claims of chivalry before the scrutinizing eyes of future historical. Faced with this blood-soaked spectacle, Saladin did not waver but hardened his heart, refusing to be lured into blind vengeance that might satisfy emotion but destroy strategy. The logic of the grand campaign demanded maintaining terrestrial momentum while rebuilding what could be salvaged of the navy, a task he pursued with the iron will. When Richard finally withdrew in 1192 and signed the Treaty of Jaffa, Jerusalem remained under Saladin's control. The sea that threatened him never truly defeated his spirit. Within a quiet chamber of Damascus citadel, the exhausted Saladin traced lines upon the sand, marking vital coastal fortifications and ports that required immediate naval base reconstruction. The naval defeat at Acre was a lighthouse in the darkness. It revealed that a nation neglecting its fleet in peacetime would weep in war for what? The disparity between the fleets lay not in courage, which favored the Muslims, but in the industrial technology and systematic investment practiced by Venice and Genoa. For this was the bitterest lesson Saladin learned from Acre, that forging a maritime nation is not an emergency response, but the patient labor of an entire generation. Saladin departed this world in 1193, leaving behind only a few coins, yet he bequeathed a legacy of two C's, one of strategy and one of questions. His successor, the Mamluk Husam al-Din Lulu, inherited Saladin's maritime vision and refined it, developing the Egyptian navy into a lethal offensive force capable of striking Crusader. Acre, which once fell to the Crusader sword against Saladin, was finally reclaimed in 1291 by Mamluks, who applied the lesson of simultaneous land and sea blockade. The ultimate naval lesson Saladin planted within the Muslim military consciousness was that maritime power is never a luxury for coastal states, but an absolute condition for. Within the hallowed halls of modern military academies where Crusader history is analyzed, Saladin's name appears in naval strategy lectures as a leader who understood his limitations. The maritime doctrine established by Majid al-Din ibn Luqman continued to evolve, eventually reaching the legendary Hayreddin Barbarossa 3 centuries later, as if the nation's navel. During the subsequent centuries, as the Mamluks eradicated the Crusader presence, they fully implemented the integrated land-sea strategy that Saladin had first meticulously charted during his reign. The Islamic military memory, which preserved the name of Majid al-Din ibn Luqman, remains a witness that true heroism is often born in the silent industrial shipyards. Umara al-Yamani, whose life ended tragically, left behind verses immortalizing Saladin and his sea, proving that art and the sword are twin faces of the civilizational. The Red Sea, once terrified by Raynald's mad adventure, was secured after Ayyubid forces annihilated every Crusader vessel that dared penetrate its waters, restoring safety to the Modder. In Western historical accounts of the Crusades, the naval dimension is frequently marginalized, as if historians prefer to portray Saladin as a desert knight, ignoring his complex. Saladin's decision to confront the Crusaders at sea was no less courageous than his stand at Hattin, for he refused the limits of the enemy's battlefield map. Inside a shadowed chamber of reclaimed Acre, historians discovered an Arabic inscription, "The sea is before us, the enemy behind," perhaps written by an Ayyubid soldier's hand. This forgotten chapter teaches future generations a vital truth. He who desires freedom upon his land must first become the undisputed master of his surrounding territorial. Saladin did not long survive Hattin, yet the naval front he opened remained a challenge for those who followed. Some closed it with wisdom, others with. Such is the legacy of the unknown Ayyubid naval knights. They did not win every battle, but they proved that a nation daring the unknown sows victory.